I think it's already going, Linda.
Oh, perfect. All right, so welcome to our webinar from parking lots to landfills, funding solar projects that empower your community. I'm Linda Durhack, the Energy and Climate Outreach Associate here at Illinois Extension and your moderator for this webinar today. And this webinar is co-sponsored by Prairie Rivers Network. Today, we will be discussing solar projects that Illinois communities have implemented in creative ways. I understand that people may have differing views on solar, but please keep in mind that this webinar is for educational purposes. We are recording this webinar. You will get a link to the recording and contact information for the speakers in the next few days. And you can always find local government education webinars on our YouTube channel. So before we get started, I do have some updates on our webinar series moving forward. So the Thriving Communities webinar series is discontinued due to the unilateral termination of the federal EPA grant that supported the Great Lakes TICTAC, and those services are currently suspended. However, we've created a new webinar series, Resilient Communities, that will continue to be supported by Illinois Extension and Prairie Rivers Network. So please stay tuned for an upcoming survey in the next couple of weeks where we'll be looking for your input on future webinar topics. So here is our agenda for today. We have about 6 speakers, so it's going to be a jam-packed webinar. Each will present, and then we will take questions at the end of presentations. If you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we will share questions with the speakers during the Q&A at the end. And depending on the question, speakers may answer in the chat as well. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Scott Tess is the Sustainability and Resilience Officer for the City of Urbana, Illinois, who will discuss transforming a landfill to a community solar project. He supervises the Commodities Recycling Program, co-manages the Landscape Recycling Center, and is responsible for working with the Sustainability Advisory Commission to implement the city's energy, water, and waste priorities. He's also responsible for managing and redeveloping the city's closed landfill as a solar farm. Scott earned his bachelor's in environmental science from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and his master of planning from Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Scott.
From United Way in Southern Illinois. Okay.
Will kick us off. So Ryan is the communications coordinator for the city of Decatur, Illinois, and he will discuss a project that used power purchase agreements to install solar panels in a parking lot. He graduated from SIU Edwardsville in 2015 with a BS in mass communications, and he spent 2 years as a multimedia journalist and reporter before moving into marketing and communications for the last 8 years. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Ryan.
Hey, thanks. Excuse me. Thanks very much. Appreciate the invite. Yeah, as you said, a communications coordinator, so I get the ability to talk about cool projects like this. I'm going to try to get my slides up here. Let's see. Can you see my slide here?
Yes, that
All
looks
right,
great.
So I'm not sure if my colleague Jason is here. He's from the company that helped put this together, the general contractor. If he is, he can jump on. Otherwise, I'm happy to provide kind of a brief overview of our project. You can see the photo there of what we did in our parking lot here at the Civic Center. Most of the city's municipal offices are located in the Civic Center, and of course, we have a lot of public events there as well. But a large public parking lot, and we were able to put in these solar canopies. Those of you that don't know much about Decatur, we're right in the middle of the state. A big, heavy agribusiness community, have about 70,000 people here. And just so you understand kind of the scale, this year's operating budget for the city is about $271 million. Really, the solar started with the hiring of CQI Associates, a consultant of ours. And then we commissioned in 2020 a feasibility study, lots of property that the city owns, facilities, some parking lots and open land, and tried to figure out where can we put solar. And one of the first projects that came out of that was the one we're talking about today, the solar canopies that you see in the Civic Center parking lot. And that was first approved by City Council in October of 2022. Again, from the picture there, you can see there's 6 solar arrays, and they have about 2,600 solar panels on top of them. which they're putting them in there at that photo at the bottom. Really was a great project for the city and an easy thing to communicate, but had to make sure the community understood what they're getting out of it. What it is doing is powering 95% of the needs of the Civic Center facility here. Those of you that understand there's regulations, it can't do a full 100%. I'm not sure exactly why that is. It's just a regulation, but it does about 95% for this facility here. It produces a lot more than that actually, and if my colleague's on, maybe he can speak to that. But the big benefit to us is that we're able to save approximately $120,000 annually, and that's going to be for the next 15 years. So it's a very significant amount of savings for the taxpayers here, and that's due to a power purchase agreement, which I'll talk about here in a minute a little bit more. So you saw the photo of it being covered parking. If the solar panels didn't even work or if it was cloudy all the time, which it isn't, at the very least, we'd get covered parking for public events and also for the Civic Center employees as well. So that was another not so big benefit, but another benefit when it's warm here during the summer and it gets shade. It's not completely a roof. There is some holes in between the solar panels, so you did get some snow on the vehicles, but other than that, that was part of the benefits as well. And of course, we're lowering the city's carbon footprint and purchasing clean energy. The other kind of benefit was that we're kind of somewhat of a trend center here in Decatur, the largest parking lot solar project for our community. And it got some good press and social media notoriety. And not too long after we got that project done, we had other government entities reaching out to us, school districts reaching out to us and saying, hey, can we do the same thing? So the fact that we were able to kind of start that trend of having solar projects in Decatur was, I also consider a benefit. When you talk about the financing, the biggest thing was it was zero cost for the city, upfront capital. Of course, we had a little bit of an expense for the contractor and the consultant, and also because we, of course, ran a study, but all of the cost of putting up the solar panels and solar arrays there was for the contractor, Acatolo. It was approximately $5 million, and again, that was all to the contractor, nothing from the city there. And also as a benefit, the contractor owns and maintains the system. So if hail hits the solar panels, somebody throws a rock through a solar panel, anything like that that damages the system, that is on the contractor to make those fixes. Benefits for the city are several different things, but what we're able to do to finance that is that we did agree to a power purchase agreement. It's a 15-year agreement where we negotiated the set kilowatt per hour for the life of that agreement, and that's how we're paying obviously for power to power the Civic Center here. So really, we're able to talk about that as a big win for the city because we get clean energy. We're saving the taxpayers that significant amount of money, $120,000 for the next 15 years. And because we set that kilowatt per hour number, we do have some budget predictability, understanding what our costs are going to be for the next 15 years. There are some other things about the agreement. The city does have the opportunity to purchase the system if we'd like. So that is as part of the agreement as well. So not many downsides to talk about. I'm sure the contractor probably might have more that they would consider downsides maybe. But just for the city, we just had some slight disruption because of the construction. Obviously it had to be fenced in while they were doing the construction. And so the city employees had to walk a little bit further to work. The public, when they came to events, didn't quite have as close of parking, but that's a very minimal downside to the benefits that we are getting from this project. I would say probably the lessons learned are more for, the construction company and the contractor. I can't speak to all that because I wasn't as involved in learning about the day-to-day of the project. But from a communication standpoint, which is what I do, just being able to talk about this project, Linda kind of started with it, solar, people have their opinions on solar. So you had to anticipate that, some people were going to have a very opinionated thoughts on this. So we wanted to provide just enough details, but not too many. I mean, the biggest thing to talk about was that the city didn't pay for any of the costs to put up the $5 million system, but we are going to be saving $120,000 over the next 15 years. And that was kind of the biggest thing that we wanted to drive home, was that this is a savings for the taxpayers. And they don't have to worry about maintaining the system either. But if you don't put too many details, you just do need to be ready to answer questions. There's people that want to get into the nitty gritty of the contract and things like that. Some people that have legitimate questions. So I think it's important to address those and keep driving the point home that this is a win for the community. You're not going to change some people's opinions, which goes to my next point. But definitely being responsive to the community that have questions, I felt was important. And you just want to keep trying to put out the best, most positive things that you can about this project. Anybody that works with social media knows that there are people that just want attention or just want to be negative, and you're not going to change that. So if you can identify who the trolls are, don't feed into that. And you especially have some of that when you talk about solar projects as well. I'm not sure if Jason's on here from the contractor company. If he wants to jump on and has anything that he wants to talk about, I'll invite him to join me now. Looks like he's coming on, maybe.
Yeah.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, yeah.
Basically, I've got a
the-
picture there of a patch in the pavement because we did hit a line underground. So that's one of the reasons I put that picture in there. But if you've got any challenges or lessons learned from this project, please feel free to talk about that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, yeah, you have something every time you have a construction project, there's always a little something that comes up that you got to overcome. And yeah, we had a pipe there, but I think the biggest thing, in this particular project was obviously it's a civic center, so from a logistics standpoint, but our partnership with the city and our relationship with the city was really phenomenal, and we established, I think, a pretty good plan from the beginning to make sure that we uh, most of the big fenced in areas were either started after or before major events that were going on with the civic center. So that was the biggest hurdle that I think we kind of had to come over is just overcome was just that logistics piece and managing to make sure that we didn't disrupt any major operations associated with the civic center. But yeah, overall it was a tremendous experience and partnership with the city. They were, extremely supportive throughout the entire process, and so yeah. Outside of that, it went pretty well.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. We'll be available at the end for questions. But yeah, overall, just be patient. Like I said, this started in October 2022, and we'll be doing a ribbon cutting this April. So it's just it's been kind of a long process. And just real quick, we've got some other projects coming up as well. Similar to what's happening here in the Civic Center, we'll have some parking canopies again in the library facility. The city owns the library facility, mostly rooftop panels there. That'll save us approximately $100,000 when we agree to that power purchase agreement. Same situation, and city will not be paying for the cost of it, but we will do a power purchase agreement. Got a pump station, a open field that is fenced in. Those will be all ground mounted panels in that bottom photo, as you'll see. That'll save us about $18,000 annually, again, when we approve that agreement. And then we are adding one more solar canopy to the parking lot here at the Civic Center, and that is going to power one of our transit facilities across the street. So lots more to come. And then, that study identified even more possibilities. So we're looking forward to that. So that's what I've got today. Again, we'll be around for questions at the end. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ryan and Jason, for sharing all of that, for emphasizing the community's role in all this. There's a lot of questions in the chat for you both, so we will have time for a Q&A at the end, but they may also answer your questions in the chat as well. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Scott Tess, that is here now and able to talk about transforming a landfill to a community solar project.
Thank you. My video looks terrible. Sorry about that. Um, and are you seeing the slides?
Yes.
There we go. Great to be with you all. I love talking about this landfill solar development. I was set to be the first speaker, had trouble getting on. That's hence the title here, but we're getting into it now. If I can advance to the next slide. There we go. So the city of Urbana owns a closed landfill, does not take garbage anymore. And they don't, it's hard to build on a closed landfill. Can't really put a slab building or any significant structure on it because that garbage underneath tends to degrade and move around. So there's not a lot of reuses, or there's limited reuses. We are making very good use of our closed landfill nonetheless. We have a police firing range, a landscape recycling center, and a fire department training range all on top of our closed landfill. Even still, we have dozens of acres of additional land unused on top of our closed landfill. So when the Future Energy Jobs Act was passed, that created the ability for us to reuse more of this space as a solar power plant. The reason we couldn't really make that work beforehand was we didn't have any user to plug in all of these acres of solar panels to take that electricity. So we could produce electricity, but we could only put it on the grid. And in that scenario, there wasn't anybody that was going to pay us to do that at a rate that would make the project work. With the development of community solar in Illinois, now there's a mode for us to put electrons on the grid and for subscribers somewhere else, not physically adjacent or directly connected to the power plant, to take that electricity off the grid and pay for it. And so we were able to develop, we actually won two community solar incentives, specifically low-income community solar incentives. Together, they're totaling a little over 5 megawatts of solar, 14,000 solar panels collectively. And that can provide electricity for somewhere around 500 to 700 households. In the images here, you can see we have this landfill that was a little less managed than it probably should have been. Some trees have started to poke through. We don't really like that on a landfill because we've got a clay cap we're trying to keep secure over the top of the garbage to shed water off of the garbage, off of the landfill. You can see in the lower picture, the solar power plant is just about finished. You can see in the lower right, there is racking that doesn't yet have solar panels on it. So I like that photo so you can see that the racking that goes underneath. And all of those trees that you see in the upper picture, those are all removed by the developer. They have to remove them. This is us leasing land to them. So the financing of this project is essentially all on the developer. We're a landowner. We're leasing the land, and we've published a request for qualifications, scored the responses, and selected a developer. In this case, SunPower. We entered into a lease option with the developer, and that gives them control of the property so that they can go to their engineering and get design. They can go to banks and get financing, and they can go to the state of Illinois and get incentives. When they put all that together, then they come back to us and they convert the lease option to a long-term lease. And they ended up leasing just over 40 acres. So this project was awarded two low-income community solar incentives. And ultimately the project was energized in 2021. It was about 4 years from the day that we published that request for qualifications to energizing the system. And it's a long timeline. But while that timeline is developing, we're doing legal work on the city side. That there was a lot of back and forth to come to terms with the developer on lease language. And part of that is this isn't just a flat lot or a farm field. There's liability that has to be apportioned, because we're working on top of a landfill. So that was a big effort. But other than that, there's a lot of time on the city side just waiting for the developer to do the engineering, do the financing, and win the incentives. So, ton of benefits from this project. First, with low-income community solar, it's an almost too good to be true kind of situation. It's a guaranteed or required of the state incentive to provide 50% savings on the electricity supply. Contracts, you don't have to have a sunny roof, because this is a community solar array somewhere out there in the world that you subscribe your electricity to. No credit checks. Your subscription is portable to any address within your utility, so anywhere within Ameren, anywhere within ComEd. And you don't have to qualify. You don't have to income qualify more than once. So if your income changes, you your subscription. Additionally, we're leasing this property to the solar developer. This is their power plant that they are selling electricity with. So they're paying us a lease payment. They are taking care of all the property that is within their fence line. So they're mowing the lawn. I mentioned they removed the trees. They're mowing the lawn. Because this property used to be a city-owned, a publicly owned, public purpose that is a government landfill, it didn't pay property taxes. Now, this leasehold, this portion of the property that is leased, is a private for-profit use, so it goes back on the tax rolls. Again, the developer, this is their power plant business. They're paying those taxes. Additionally, the city acts as an anchor tenant. That is, we are one subscriber that portion of power from the power plant. So up to 10% was the rule at the time. So we're powering the entirety or subscribing the entirety of the city hall electricity to this low-income community solar array, and we get the same 50% cost of electricity as all the other subscribers. And then, all the benefits I already mentioned for all the other subscribers. Don't have to have a roof. You can be an apartment dweller. You can be a house dweller that has a shady roof because of a tree. And you can still participate in renewable energy by subscribing your electricity to a power plant somewhere else out there. So a ton of benefits stacked on top of each other here. Some of the lessons learned. We knew that we're working on top of a landfill. We have a clay cap, and you can see the racking here for the solar panels. We knew that what they do in a lot of installations is drill that racking into the ground. We didn't want that. So we asked them to ballast that racking, right? So that racking is actually attached to those concrete blocks. And you can see that that's just weighted down and it meets all the wind codes and all of that. We didn't we were going to allow them to have shallow penetrations with fence posts, but they actually went ahead and ballasted the fence posts as well. I'd never seen that before, didn't know that was a thing, and it's working out. And so that's something we learned is we can go ahead and also ask for ballasting the fence posts. Another element that we learned when all these materials, you can see the rock, you can see the concrete, the racking, and the panels. When they hit the go button on this project, all that material comes in flatbed truck after flatbed truck after flatbed truck, and I mean semi-length flatbed trucks. It's on and on and on. That tears up roads. And, we have some general guidelines in our lease that, whatever damage is done during construction is a normal, thing that happens during construction, they would repair. But in the future, we learned that we should just be more specific about that so that everything, we're not haggling over where the road ends and begins and that sort of thing. And then the last thing is just putting in the document that you want all the as-built for all the above and below ground utilities so that everyone knows where they are. This being on private property, it's perhaps not subject to the statewide utility locates services until it goes into right of way or public property. And you can see from a different angle our solar array on the lower right-hand side, we still have a balance of unused landfill land. In the lower right is the lines of the solar panels. Above that is the land. Those lines are the landscape recycling center, and we still have land that we don't have any other use for. And so we're just republishing that request for qualifications. We still have this, the federal incentives. We still have state incentives, and we've already selected another vendor, and we're working with them. I think they've got everything lined up except the state incentives, and we're going to do it all over again on some more land at our closed landfill. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. That is very exciting to hear that there's going to be another solar project in the works. All right, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speakers that will be talking about Steeleville and their solar projects. One second here. So Dee Tanner is the business development manager at A&I Builders. She has been with A&I Builders developing businesses in the energy sector since 2021 and leads the solar team at A&I in sales and operations. And prior to this, she worked for Kroger and retired as an executive and had over 40 years with the company. We'll also hear from Jim Zeidler, who is the chief of police and the village manager at Steeleville. And he's been in this position since 2017 and worked as a police officer in the village of Steeleville and Cape Girardeau in Missouri. And before becoming a police officer, he graduated from Southeast Missouri State in 2006 with a bachelor's in criminal justice. So I'll go ahead and share your slides here and you two can get to presenting.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for having us today. We appreciate the opportunity to share our experience in Steeleville, Illinois, and hopefully it'll help others as they go down the same journey. So if you want to go to the next slide, that'd be great. Okay, so we are talking about Steeleville, Illinois, which is a small town in southern Illinois, approximately 2,500 population. We're located about 70 miles southeast of St. Louis. I am going to go back, and I am the representative of the contractor who installed the 8 different projects. And of course, Jim is the city manager, and you'll hear from him in a second. But I just really want to reiterate the partnership that was created. And that's really why we're doing a dual partnership or a dual presentation today, because it's not just about being a contractor. We are truly a partner with Steeleville and with the other communities that we're working with. And I think that's just very important from a contractor perspective to build that trust and that partnership. And I believe we successfully did that in Steeleville and continue to do that with future plans. But it all did begin in Steeleville with the city receiving the Energy Transition Community Grant Program. And Amanda, I apologize, I misspelled your name there, but Ananda, I know, helped facilitate that. And that really did begin the community on this journey of energy savings and what was next. So this process that we're talking about today really was a process, and it took probably a year and a half to develop the partnership and develop the specifications and the project as a whole, just to have the research and the knowledge that was important to be able to execute such a plan. We did put together a 2-phase plan, which did begin once again in 24, and then we're hopeful that we'll continue this project in 25 and 26, and I'll talk about the future here in a minute. But the phase 1 plan is what we're talking about today, and that consisted of 8 projects purchased, which represented about 75% of the city's total consumption. Now, again, we're talking about a small community here. However, they have significant bills from an energy perspective. So this was going to generate a lot of savings for the community and in those different areas throughout the community that were high consumption, like the fire department, like the sewage treatment plants. excuse me, my phone's going off, the sewage treatment plant, like the Civic Center. Those were areas that we looked at. And we'll talk about the other meters within the community. But in this case, there were 8 meters or 8 projects that represented about 75%. So I would like to call these the low-hanging fruit, and certainly benefited the city greatly. And approximately 80% of the total project was funded through state and federal and grant monies. And just to talk a little bit about that, of course, I think everybody in this call is familiar with Illinois Shines or Illinois Solar for All. This is not an Illinois Solar for All community, so we went through Illinois Shines. And then the federal is the elective pay. And the elective pay, of course, was made available through the Inflationary Reduction Act passed in 21, which enables nonprofit organizations such as government entities to enjoy the same benefits, even though they do not pay taxes. And of course, that's done through some processes that, the Department of Energy, you set up the account, and then of course you submit the projects for the pre-registration number, and then with those pre-registration numbers, you apply those to the applicable IRS forms to get your monies back. And I would tell you that even as of this week, that we have completed those pre-registrations for these 8 projects. And again, a partnership, right? We worked with Jim, and we sat down and we assisted Jim with all of the materials that were needed and the assistance with those pre-registrations, and successfully submitted them. So we're just now waiting for those pre-registration numbers, so then the city can file those required IRS forms. And honestly, the process was pretty simple. It's overwhelming to learn about, but once you do understand it, it's a pretty simple process that really does enable the city to actually purchase. This was a purchase agreement versus a power purchase agreement. And Jim once again worked with the local contractor and created that partnership. So that's the financing that we're talking about. With elective pay, we had the opportunity to purchase the system, which is funded through the Energy Transition Community Grant. And then the Climate Bank is where the city actually worked with the local bank through the Climate Bank for their lending partner. And again, it benefited greatly just to acquire that local lending partner with the bank, and I think that worked very smoothly for the city as well. And I believe, and Jim, you can chime in here, but I believe you have a grace period of a year before you actually start paying on that loan, which actually enables the city to get many of their credits back in before they actually start paying on it, and we'll be able to pay that down very, very quickly. Jim, did I state that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, our first payment is not due until January of 26. So we did receive that grace period, and that, once again, as Dee said, that's going to be huge for us to get those incentives back to use those towards our payment. And having all these local options available to us was tremendous. The local bank here in town, A&I is also here in town, so it's been huge for us.
Okay. Next slide, please. The community benefits, and Jim might want to chime in here as well, but the annual savings is estimated over $60,000 for 25 years, or $1.5 million savings for the city. And of course, that supports other initiatives that the city has, whether you're talking about, community events like the annual 4th of July event, or if you're talking about other projects that are going on throughout the city. Generating over 420 kilowatts annually, obviously protecting the environment and being good stewards of the city, not only saving money, but reducing the carbon footprint and enabling other projects through other monies. And I know the city has a big project right now with updating water lines in town and a fiber communication. So that just lightens up the budget, enable them to do more projects like that to sustain their community and to continue to build their community. And obviously, it's building a village of energy conservation and local residents. The other thing that we've seen there is that local residents and other businesses in town and the surrounding communities, we've seen an uptick in installations there as well, because it's almost contagious, right? People start to talk about it, they start to understand it. And we're creating an energy not community, not just for the city of Steeleville, but for the city of Steeleville and its residents and neighboring communities as well. Lessons learned, and I think Ryan mentioned this, but enable the process. Be patient with the process. Don't just jump into it. Make sure that you're aligning yourself with a good contractor. Make sure that you understand your resources. There are just so many great resources like here today. But understand that, but don't be afraid to move forward just because you're not an expert. There are many experts in the field that can assist and can help answer some of those questions. And ask the right questions. Get your tax advisors involved. Understand elective pay. Understand the financials through your lender. That's going to enable the process and benefit you greatly. And certainly, and I think Jim will probably chime in here, is just to go local because it has been very, very supportive and has been beneficial to the community. And Jim, I don't know if you had any other lessons that you wanted to offer.
No, I don't think I have a whole lot of lessons. I mean, once again, A&I was great for us. It was great to have the local business here in town. They're close. Phone call away, even that, I can just drive down to the office and talk to them in person if need be. One of the biggest things we're still working with, as Dee mentioned, was a fiber project that was to get internet to these locations. A lot of these locations were actually water wells as well as our sewer lagoon, which do not have internet, and we needed internet to communicate the usages of these solar panels. So we're working with another local company, which is an internet provider, who's working with us to run fiber optic cable to these locations and setting us up for even future development with our water and sewer system. So this project has opened the door to even more projects that we had on our plate.
Okay. So what's next in the city of Steeleville? I told you earlier that there was a phase 2, and that phase 2 is to take the other 27 meters that the city has where we don't have the rooftop space or the land, and create a qualifying facility for the community where we can net meter for all of those facilities as well. So we've got to realize the results, as Jim said, regarding this project, and then we'll move forward with that project. And looking at using the water treatment plant and that water as being the surface where the solar panels will go. So just a great opportunity for space that you don't even realize that you have, that will benefit the city even greater. So with that, I think that's it, and we can take questions later. Jim, did you have anything to add?
No, I don't have anything to add, and Dee's much more knowledgeable about these things than I am. That's why I asked her to present today. So I appreciate you doing that, Dee.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it looks like Amanda Pancott is ready to go. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Linda. And thanks so much to all our presenters so far. It's really exciting to hear about your community's solar stories. Our hope for this webinar was to highlight 3 different financing mechanisms for solar. So you heard about a lease agreement with the city of Urbana, a power purchase agreement with the city of Decatur, and then the village of Steeleville utilized direct pay tax incentives. So along with that, we also wanted to highlight a couple of unique projects, and those were really exciting to hear about. I'm going to now share details about the state and federal solar incentives that are available and that made the projects you heard about possible. I can't count the number of times I've heard community leaders and small businesses tell me that going solar was a no-brainer, and you're going to hear why Illinois is such a great place to pursue solar and save money on electricity. So Illinois has set ambitious goals for renewable energy, and a key way that the state is encouraging solar development is through something called renewable energy credits, or RECs. Every time a solar system produces electricity, it generates RECs, which are the environmental value of that energy that's produced. Utilities in Illinois are required to buy RECs to help meet the state's renewable energy targets. So this creates a financial incentive program in Illinois for going solar. That program in Illinois is called Illinois Shines, and it's managed by our Illinois Power Agency. There are actually 6 categories of RECs that you can see here in the bottom right-hand corner. The RECs represent the value that the project has over a 15-year period. For smaller projects, they're paid out up front, and then for larger projects, they're paid out over a 7-year period. And then one important thing to note is that to participate in the Illinois Shines program, you have to work with an approved vendor. Most solar installers either are an approved vendor or have one that they work with regularly, and then those savings are passed on to their customers. Typically, RECs cover about 25 to 35% of solar project costs. The Illinois Solar for All program is actually a separate REC program in Illinois than Illinois Shines. This program is designed to expand access to solar for low-income households, as well as nonprofits and public facilities. And the RECs in this program are at a higher incentive rate, which makes the savings greater for this program. There are 3 sub-programs for Solar for All in Illinois, and I think it's really important that community leaders understand these programs because there's multiple ways for your community to benefit. So real quick, the residential program is available to anyone in Illinois that meets certain income requirements. The community solar and the nonprofit public facility sub-programs bring projects to environmental justice and low-income communities. There are 2 different maps that you can look at to see if your community is eligible for these 2 programs. We heard from Scott Tess that the city of Urbana's landfill project is actually an example of a Solar for All community solar project. So it's located in a low-income area, and low-income ratepayers pay for a subscription to the project, and then they save about 50%. That's typical for Solar for All community solar projects on the supply side of electricity bill. And then the nonprofit public facility program brings solar to nonprofit and public agencies that serve low-income people in low-income and EJ communities. This includes things like libraries, fire stations, and senior centers. If your community owns a facility that's utilized by one of these critical service providers, you could be eligible for the Solar for All program. This YouTube video in the bottom right-hand corner is an example of a Solar for All project on the Cunningham Children's Home in Urbana. And I'll share my slides. I've got lots of hyperlinks and ways you can interact and learn more. So it's important when you're considering solar, a good first thing to do is, do you qualify for Solar for All for some of these types of projects? So in addition to the state incentives, the federal government offers tax credits to make solar more affordable. So I've already seen some questions come into the chat of like, what are the federal incentives? They're in the way of tax credits. Thanks to the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, the federal investment tax credit currently covers 30% of the cost of installing a solar system. And this is a tax credit that communities and commercial systems are going to be utilizing. So local units of government and nonprofits have historically gone solar through leases and power purchase agreements because they could not benefit from these tax credits. And again, these are the options we saw city of Urbana and the city of Decatur pursue. And this is still a common way that tax-exempt entities go solar. However, the Inflation Reduction Act also created a new provision called elective pay, or people also call it direct pay. This option gives tax-exempt entities the ability to receive a direct payment from the IRS for clean energy tax credits. So this is the method that we saw the village of Steeleville pursue. So I think their project was really innovative because they were probably one of the first in the state to be proactive and use this new method, which is really exciting. Beyond that baseline 30% federal tax credit, there are additional bonus incentives that can be added. So there's an energy community bonus that adds 10% to that tax credit for areas that have a history of fossil fuel dependence. And there's another map for this, and really most of downstate Illinois shows up on this energy community map. Next is a low income bonus, which provides either 10 to 20% credit for projects in low income areas. And then there's some other domestic content bonus and prevailing wage requirements for larger projects. For time's sake today, I'm not going to get into these, but happy to talk more about this with folks and share more information. So we heard from the village of Steeleville that there's often a delay in receiving your state and federal incentives. So to address this short-term financing need, the Illinois Climate Bank has established a new energy efficiency revolving loan fund. It offers low-interest loans for energy projects across the state for nonprofits and public entities. The pre-application for this loan program is open right now. I've got the website here for folks to learn more. I also dropped a couple other things I wanted to mention on this slide. There are some other energy solar grants available through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. There's a website here that you can check out. And then the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency has often had energy efficiency grants available as well to keep an eye on. And I'll get a link added there. So I'm going to give you a quick real world example where you can see some numbers of a real project. This is the Dixon Park solar project for their park district, developed by Straight Up Solar. So the initial project cost was about $297,000. After you apply your renewable energy credits from the state of Illinois, your federal tax credit, and in this situation, they pursued the direct elective pay provision. And then ComEd and Ameren both offer a smart inverter rebate. So after all those incentives, this project ended up costing the Dixon Park District about $60,000, and they expect to save about $12,000 per year on their electricity costs. With the new administration at the federal government, I've been getting a lot of questions about whether the federal clean energy tax credits will remain in place. I wish I had all the answers. I don't, but I wanted to address this because I knew it was a common question. So the tax credits that are available are part of the Inflation Reduction Act and therefore part of the U.S. tax code, meaning that they should not be able to be rescinded by executive action or a federal agency rulemaking. Any change to these tax credits would require new legislation to be passed by both the House and the Senate. We do expect Republicans to revisit the clean energy provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act, likely through the budget reconciliation bill. This process started in February with the passage of budget resolutions, but there's several steps from where they are now to getting to an actual budget reconciliation bill. And the timeline is a bit unknown, but likely will happen over the course of the next several months. According to legal experts, there is historical precedent that tax credit provisions that are repealed typically won't take effect until January 1st of the following year after that legislation is passed. So that means that projects placed in service before the end of 2025 are likely to remain eligible for the current tax credits. So even if Congress moves forward with a repeal or a modification. Looking out past 2025 is more uncertain and speculative, so I won't comment on that. While there is a lot of uncertainty, there is also a lot of bipartisan support to keep clean energy tax credits in place, and that's for good reason. Over 80% of investments from the Inflation Reduction Act were directed to Republican congressional districts. Solar energy is growing in support for it, backed across the political spectrum. And installations are on the rise in both red and blue states, which leads to jobs and local revenue. And I wanted to point out there's been many recent actions in the way of letters to congressional leadership highlighting this support, including letters from a group of House Republicans, a letter from 214 small businesses, as well as a letter from mayors and local leaders across the country. If preserving these solar tax credits is important to you, your organization, or your community, here are some ways you could take action right now. You can reach out to your congressional leaders, look for sign-on letters and petitions like the ones I mentioned on the previous slide. And one of the biggest things I'm hearing is that it's important to tell your solar story. So if you or your community has gone solar, sharing those stories, and here are a few ways that you might do that. And then I also wanted to mention that there's also a federal tax credit for residential solar projects. It's also a 30% credit. It's not getting as much support, likely because you've got big solar companies that are out there, supporting the more commercial projects. But so this is also something that's important to support to make sure folks in our communities can continue to benefit from these federal tax credits. Finally, I wanted to share some ways to get technical assistance for your community's energy goals. I'm happy to meet with folks to help you get the process started. If you want to talk about what you heard on today's webinar or about anything in my slides in more detail, I'm happy to hop on the phone or on Zoom or maybe meet in person. To get you started, there's a brand new Energy Navigator program administered by the Great Plains Institute that's going to provide technical assistance on energy goals for communities. This program is just getting off the ground, but if you want to be on the list, you can contact Sydney with Great Plains Institute. Another opportunity in Illinois is some free energy assessments for public water treatment systems from the Smart Energy Design Assistance Center. Through these assessments, you will learn about solar opportunities for your water treatment systems. And then finally, here are 2 technical assistance opportunities that are specific to the direct elective pay tax credits. So whether are you currently in the process of utilizing these credits or plan to, here are some opportunities. One is with the Lawyers for Good Government, and then the second is weekly office hours provided by the IRS. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it to Monika, who's with the Great Plains Institute, to talk about one more technical assistance opportunity.
Hello. Thank you, Amanda. Hi, all. I'm Monika Vadali. I work at the Great Plains Institute based in Minneapolis. We're a nonprofit that do energy work. I work here as a senior program manager in the Renewable Energy Program. Great presentations, and I think that really sets me up for the 2 minutes that I will take to just pitch a couple of technical assistance programs that we are looking to offer. One was, as Amanda just mentioned, the Regional Navigators program that Sydney is kind of getting started. It's a great program to join if you have energy assessment needs. They are still in the planning stage for that program, which will go on till the end of the year. We are actively looking for communities to recruit communities to that, so we can have a plan, and then it'll go on till the end of 2026. The second program we have is the Soul Smart program, which is mostly geared towards local governments. So if there's anybody on the call who would be interested in benefiting from achieving Soul Smart designations, then that is also something that we can help with. In addition to this, we are also working with the Nature Conservancy in Illinois and Indiana to get together a few communities and local governments to kind of assess what their current needs are specifically around, and opportunities are around looking at solar on brownfields. So if there are communities that are looking to explore that opportunity, I would encourage you to get in touch with either me or Linda, and kind of get into that program. We are looking for maybe 4 or 5 communities, and we'll start right away with interviews to get some baseline info on community energy needs and what you're looking for, and then try and match resources and other technical assistance to kind of suit your needs to get your projects off the ground. And I think that's all I had, so I think I will pass it on to Linda. I see a lot of questions. And I do see Hillary's hand has been up for a while.
Yes, thank you so much to all of our speakers. We really appreciate your time, all of your presentations. And we will try to get to as many questions as we can, but we do have about 5 minutes for Q&A. Hillary, I do see that your hand is raised. Did you have a question that you were going to ask?
I have a comment. I just want to well, first, I am the Deputy Director for the Office of Energy and Business Utility for DCO. So I definitely want to thank the organizers of this. I'm grateful to Amanda Pankow with Prairie Rivers just for being a champion for renewable energy and those deployment of resources in Illinois, to a gold star to all the local leaders for being forward thinkers and result oriented by utilizing Illinois' resources to solve your community's problems. We're grateful to the solar industry of businesses engaging these public entities. I just would really encourage those entities to really target the CEJA funded entities and those target entities like those taxing bodies underneath the Energy Transition Community Grant, so that we can see more examples of the state's ecosystem of resources being used throughout our communities, throughout Illinois. We are really, I do see some other agency colleagues on the line. Just know that we do seek to be available to you, so feel free to reach out to us. I would like if I could make sure I get the contact for all of those who presented, so that we can make sure we are sharing your success and being able to share your information with others so that they can replicate your success.
Thank you so much, Hillary. It's great to hear your support. We will go ahead. It looks like we had a lot of questions for Decatur about their project. And feel free if you have other questions to put them in the chat right now. Even if we can't get to it now, we can follow up with you later. So it looks like there's a question about, where do the savings go? Is there a reinvestment in more? And kind of, how are the finances working out for a system like that?
Yeah, I believe it's probably related to the city's budget. I failed to give credit where credit was due. It was my former deputy city manager that really kind of came up with this and decided about what's going to happen with all the savings. But we haven't realized that yet. We're just looking for ways to reduce costs to the taxpayers always. So this would probably just allow us to not raise rates in other areas. I don't think we have a specific idea of where that exact 120,000 goes. It'll just be a reason that we don't have to raise other rates in other areas. That's probably not the best answer, but that's all I've got for now.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Someone asked, although the city of Decatur did not incur costs for this project, we often hear that the cost materials associated with raising solar over parking lots in comparison to standard heights we see in fields can be cost prohibited. Can you or others on the panel speak to points to offset this argument? I know that one's a bit more specific. Jason?
Yeah, Ryan, I'm not sure if you want me to kind of field that question. I'm happy to do so.
Yeah,
Well,
Jason said, I mean, we didn't kind of as I said, the city didn't incur any cost for the putting them up. So I think that's probably for the contractor.
yeah, I think you're correct. Is obviously carports are a little bit more expensive to construct, certainly. And so what ultimately what led this project to success is kind of a balancing act between, well, first of all, it was an Illinois Solar for All project. So it had a little bit higher incentive value. And so it was a little bit of a balancing act of making sure that we achieved the savings that are required in an Illinois Solar for All project for the city, and still being able to manage the higher cost of build. So that is really what determined whether or not the project was feasible, is just kind of that balancing act of monetizing the best incentive package, along with also being able to swallow the higher cost.
Thank you so much for your answer. It's really cool to be seeing solar panels going over parking lots, because I know that's something that people have been really interested in for a long time. I appreciate your answers to that. We are at time. So we're probably going to need to wrap up here, but we will be sending the slides and contact information for the presenters afterwards, and the recording will be available. And feel free to reach out to us if you have any other questions. And we hope to see you on our next webinar. We won't be doing one in April, since we'll be planning future webinars for resilient communities, but we look forward to seeing you all in May. Thank you so much.